Hey guys, it's Appleminte. Welcome back again to my channel and happy Friday. For today's video, I wanted to work on a piece of artwork for myself since I realized that in the past few months I haven't had much inspiration or anything that's really piqued my interest in terms of drawing, and I really wanted to sit down and create something for myself because those are the pieces that I always find the most fun and that I can just really go all in with and let my imagination go wild, if you will. So that's what I wanted to do today, but before we get into that, I just want to take a quick moment to thank today's video sponsor, which helps me put food on the table for me and Ryan, and for Pepper, of course. I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Switchcraft. Switchcraft is a gripping mystery story about modern-day witches with a strong female witch as its protagonist who is dead set on solving the disappearance of her best friend. The game features a choose-your-own-adventure type story, as well as thousands of magical Match 3 levels. As you play the game, it's up to you to figure out who the suspect in Lydia's disappearance is. The aesthetic of the game resembles a graphic novel with detailed, hand-painted visuals, and I personally really love the art style and was actually drawn to it when the game was first shown to me. Switchcraft's story also features over 85 different characters from a wide variety of cultural backgrounds, as well as both disabled and LGBTQIA+ representation. You can check out the link in my description to download and play the game, as it really helps my channel. And if you play the game, do let me know who you think the suspect is in the comments below. So thank you again to Switchcraft for sponsoring today's video. So I'm going to start off with the sketch for this piece. It's going to be really rough, but with my sketches, what I like to do is just kind of lay out what I want everything to look like as much as I can, because that's the best opportunity to really mess with the pose or little details, colors, things like that, because I find it a lot harder to do any of that when you're actually creating the artwork as a whole and you're doing the final piece with the line art. For this specifically, I kind of sat down with the idea of a moonlit forest in my head, and I went from there. And I had a color palette in mind of mostly like greens, teals, dark blues. So I stuck a lot to that, and that's really where this began. So I didn't have a necessary idea other than that in mind, and I just kind of sat and let my imagination go and see where it took me. And so I always find that I like my artwork best when I sit down without a specific idea in mind, because when I'm sitting down and I have an idea of what I want to draw in my head, it often doesn't look like it does in my head and usually just discourages me. For this, I just basically started off the concept and that was it, and then I just went from there. So I find that I was having a little bit more fun with it, and I actually didn't know if I wanted to continue it after I finished the rough sketch, which you just saw me do there, because I liked it, but part of me felt like it was just okay, and I wasn't sure if I could turn it into anything. I spoke with a friend of mine and a few other people, and they agreed, and I also posted on Twitter that I should just continue it. So I went for it, and I guess I'm glad that I did, because it ended up being something that I like, but you'll have to wait a little bit to see that. So I kind of came up with a little bit of a backstory for her, nothing super crazy, but it always does help when creating something to become more attached to it if you have a story behind it or an idea that's further than just the artwork itself. So I imagined her to be a bunny girl who exists and lives in a forest, and she is blind, but she uses her acute hearing to listen to the sounds of the forest and get around, and she moves around mostly at night to collect herbs and plants and uses them to create things to heal and help the animals and wildlife of the forest. So that's what I thought of when I looked at her, and so that's what her little story is. If you want to name her, go ahead. I didn't come up with anything past that little story, but coming up with something like that helps you get more into the piece, especially since I was losing a little bit of motivation at first and not sure if I wanted to continue it. Once I thought about that, that definitely helped me a lot. So right now I have completed the line art and I'm going in and doing some of the flat color. I will zoom in a moment when I'm actually shading, so you can see some more of the detail up close, because it's a little hard to see when I have it zoomed out like this. Yeah, flat color is usually a stage that takes a little while, mostly because it's just a lot of like making sure every little piece is filled in, but it doesn't really require many brain cells. It's just a necessary step. The shading is always my favorite part to do in the whole process. I guess the sketch and the shading are my two favorite things to do in a piece, and this is no exception. For this piece, I had in mind to play around with lighting a little differently, and I enjoy doing that because I think that it definitely helps to improve my skill and also make my pieces differ from each other rather than all being a similar color palette or a similar lighting method. So for this one, I had the idea that I wanted there to be a moon in the background, very bright, because like I said, she moves around at nighttime. And so I wanted there to be a big moon that was casting a rim lighting behind her. So when you do that, the best way to go about it is, or at least the way I do it, is to just color like you normally would in terms of like using regular shades of what her colors would look like in regular lighting. And I'm keeping, when I'm shading here, I'm keeping in mind where the light source is going to be coming from, which is behind her. So I'm not doing any kind of crazy shading, and I am putting some of the shadows a little bit more angled toward where the light would like be hitting, but she's not going to be getting that much shading in the front since she's going to be very much in the dark and then being backlit. So that's kind of how I'm looking at this. Now, I'm not an expert at lighting, and I did look up some references, but you know, like I said, not an expert here. So some of this might not be 100% accurate in how the shadows and lighting would hit her, but I'm doing my best here, okay, to branch out. But yeah, so at this point, I'm just doing some basic shading. I guess the shading on this piece didn't take me as long as I thought it was going to, because like I said, I'm doing it a little differently based on the lighting that will be behind her, but usually shading takes me quite a bit of time because it's just, you want to make sure you have the detail and everything correct. And it's a lot of layers. It's a lot of like going in with shadows and highlights and then tweaking with different colors overlaid on that, and different like layer properties. And I don't know if I'm speaking another language right now, but I'm just rambling. But something that I like to do when shading as well is to add in some color variation. So like if you'll notice in the middle of her leotard that she's wearing, it's got a little bit of a bluish hue to it, like in the very center and on her legs, and that kind of helps with like varying the colors a little bit so that it's not too samey. I'm also adding a lot of gold shimmer and shine on the trim of her hood, her cape, and her outfit. I think that just looks really cool because I imagine that would just be gold plated or something, or gold thread that is reflective. And yeah, like details like that help to bring a piece a little bit more to life rather than just having regular, like one layer for shadow and that's it. Like do some highlights, add some extra color. That's something that I've been trying to do in my pieces more often recently because it really does add an extra touch. So here I go in and now I've added a multiply layer over the entire artwork, which I will end up just putting over her and not the background. But I put a multiplier layer and I lower the opacity of that because I want it to look like her colors are a little bit darker. And that way when you go in with another layer, which is what I'm doing right now, I have it set to add. If you guys are well versed in the lingo of digital artwork, I guess, digital programs, the add layer is kind of like a layer that's great for making things look like they're glowing. So I'm using that right now to add lighting that would be coming from behind her. I'm making her eyes and her face slightly have a little bit of a glow, and I'm adding a lot to the background, the moon. And another thing that I end up doing is adding another layer on top of everything and making it like blue, and then lowering the opacity of that and setting it to hard light, or soft light, sorry. And making everything have a slight bluish tint to it to kind of pull all of the colors that I did that I used in this piece together. It really helps. And now I'm just adding in some bushes, which admittedly I'm not very good at, so this took a little bit to play with. But yeah, overall, at the end of the piece here and adding details, I'm pretty happy with it. I like how she came out, and I hope you like her as well. If you want to name her, feel free to suggest some names in the comments. I'll take a look through. But I had a lot of fun with her, and as always, all of my links, as well as the link to our sponsor for today, are in the description below. So please check those out. I'd really appreciate it, as it helps a lot. And I'll see you guys all next Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. As always, I appreciate you guys for watching my video, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Bye bye!